Greetings from OneMedRadio. I'm Matt Margolis. Today we're joined by Jeff Riley, CEO of Synthetic Biologics, an East Coast-based biotechnology company developing DNA-based therapeutics and disease-modifying medicines for serious illnesses. Synthetic Biologics trades on the Amex under the symbol SYN. Mr. Riley, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Matt. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start with a discussion of your R&D. So what's your lead candidate? How does it work?
Matt, I'd love to do so. We basically have three products that are at the clinical stage of development. The one that we're no longer heavily involved in is for fibromyalgia. It's called Flupertine, and that was partnered in 2010 with Meta, a Swedish drug company. So I'll focus on our other two products that are in-house and that we're moving forward. One is for multiple sclerosis. That is called Trimesta. We just completed a 164-patient relapsing remitting trial enrollment of patients. It's being run out of UCLA by Rhonda Voskul, and we expect to have information data from that phase 2 trial sometime in early 2014. We are also in the process of enrolling another 60 patients for cognitive dysfunction, also in multiple sclerosis in women, and that trial should begin shortly as well. Our other product, which is very exciting, is a zinc acetate formulation and is specifically for Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS. The phase 1 trial of that is going to begin in about 2 weeks, and we'll roll into a phase 2/3 trial by third quarter of this year. We're hoping for data from that phase 2/3 trial in first quarter or potentially even second quarter of next year, 2013. Again, there's really no therapies for ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease at this point in time. So we feel very, very good that if this product does show efficacy, which has preclinically looked like it's going to do very well, we'll have something that can help patients substantially.
And what specifically do you think makes your unique formulation for ALS opportunistic?
I don't know if it's opportunistic. I think there's a fair amount of data that's been out in the public domain with respect to zinc and how zinc functions as it relates to copper, especially in central nervous system disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's disease. So the mechanism of action is essentially trying to balance the amount of copper in an individual's brain with the amount of zinc that actually pulls copper and is complementary to some extent pulling copper from the brain. There is a bit of a balancing act there, but the theory and the science behind it is very solid. So we are following on years and years of research to see whether or not we can show that this works in patients.
So in your opinion, why is there a resurgence in gene medicine?
We're calling it Gene Medicine 2.0, and in November of last year, we decided to change directions a little bit in the company and going forward focus heavier on biologics, which is why we renamed the company Synthetic Biologics. Gene medicine is, I think, coming into its own, similar to monoclonal antibodies and other therapies over the years, in particular biologics. It really does take 15 to 20 years of hard academic, rigorous research to get a set of technologies or a set of products to a point where you can do the translational work, put those in the humans, and see exactly what's going to happen. About 10, 12 years ago, gene therapy 1.0 was very famous. Several companies raised billions of dollars. The result was that it was not ready for prime time. It was a little bit premature, and basically gene therapy dropped off the face of the planet. Big pharmas decided to abandon those areas, not all of them, but most of them, and were deprioritized within the discovery functions in these companies. However, over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of progress made, and I think you're going to see a resurgence because a lot of the issues from delivery to immunogenicity have been overcome by a lot of great academic research, and we felt that the time was right and the inflection point was right for a company, in particular a small company like us, to jump into that world, build a team around that, and begin to pull these products into the clinic.
So I wonder if we could circle back to sort of your company rebranding, your recent changes. Maybe you can introduce us to the recent management changes.
You bet. So I became chairman of the company in November, and I took the CEO role in February of this year. We also hired John Monahan as our Chief Science Officer. John is one of the foremost experts in the gene therapy area. He was also the founder and CEO of a company called Avogen, which was one of the bigger gene therapy companies 10, 12 years ago. It reached a market cap of $2 billion and then crashed back to earth at a later date and was acquired by somebody else. Fantastic individual, very, very, very knowledgeable about the gene therapy space. We've also hired recently a gentleman named Evan Ballantyne. Evan was the Chief Financial Officer for Clinical Data, where he was for 5 years and successfully sold that company last year for $1.3 billion. That was an R.J. Kirk company, and we'll get to that shortly, I think, when we talk a little bit about our partnering strategies with his privately held company, Intrexon. We've also hired Mike Calico, who used to be at Novartis and ran Novartis' gene therapy ocular programs, and we continue to fill out the rest of the team with press releases over the next few weeks. You'll see filling in the Chief Medical Officer role as well as VP of Regulatory roles. So you'll see a team that's very focused on the products that we have today from a clinical development perspective, but more importantly, looking to the future at biologics and more specifically gene medicine. This team will be one of the best teams out there as far as knowing how to take a product from IND on through.
Now, you were eager to discuss your collaboration with Intrexon Corporation. In late March 2012, you announced your Q1 earnings, and one major highlight was the execution of this collaboration that occurred in Q4 of 2011. So I was wondering if you could go into a little detail about this company milestone.
You bet. A lot of folks in the industry, in particular on the banking side, know a name, Randall J. Kirk, also known as R.J. Kirk. This gentleman was very prolific in the biotech and pharma industries with respect to M&A and building companies. His mantra tends to be, he's going to buy into a company, he's going to build the company, he doesn't sell his stock, and he gets the company to a point where there's a value inflection point and an M&A transaction occurs. He was involved with General Injectables, Sios Pharma, King Pharmaceuticals, New River was his company, and most recently, public side, his company was Clinical Data. I've hired his ex-chief financial officer recently for our company. And during that time period, he's also started and is now very focused on a company called Intrexon, which is a privately held company with roughly 300 employees in it that it is focused entirely on DNA therapies, the platforms in DNA therapies, as well as cell-based treatments, stem cells, you name it. If it's biologic, he's been going out looking at platforms and acquiring those and building a platform-based company around those technologies. So we were very pleased back in late November of last year, when we were able to get a deal done with his company, which was announced. And it was specifically around one indication to begin with. We hope to expand that collaboration over the next couple of months. But the initial collaboration is around pulmonary arterial hypertension, and we're using their RioSwitch technology in addition to our expertise, and the two teams are working together to move this through the preclinical studies and hopefully into the clinic.
So maybe you can go into some detail about pulmonary arterial hypertension and specifically what the market opportunity is there.
PAH is a nasty disease, basically the thickening of the arteries that lead from the lung to the heart and back. It's a deadly disease, lifespan 3 to 5 years after contracting this disease. There are some pretty good therapies out there today, everything from Viagra, which is used to help expand that area in a pinch, to some of the prostacyclines, and there's a variety of companies playing in this area. One of the downsides is that most of the therapies, including prostacyclin, there is a dose-limiting issue in that you can't give a patient too much of that without an adverse reaction. So with gene therapy, the goal is to try and get the DNA directly into the cells that are at the location of the disease state itself, so in the pulmonary arteries, where we will then be able to activate those genes to produce the proteins, to produce the prostacyclin. And the theory is that we will be able to get a much higher amount of the product locally at the place where it needs to be with a much lower systemic side effect profile, which will obviously benefit patients greatly. They don't have as many side effects, but they have the drug that they need to have at that location to hopefully ameliorate the disease state.
Now, I want to circle back to your in-house pipeline. So can you go into some detail about your approval calendar for Trimesta and your ALS formulation?
We briefly touched on it earlier for the Trimesta, for the MS drug. We're looking at getting phase 2 data early next year, or early in 2014. Thereafter, we'll have to look at what the trial design. It is a pretty big trial, 165 patients, 164 patients. We'll have to get together with the FDA and see what we need to do for a registration trial. After that, the endpoints are such, keeping in mind there are 2 MS trials we're running, one for cognition and one for relapse and remitting MS. And we don't have a clear picture on if we can accelerate the process after that trial or not. So I can't give you a clear, definitive answer on that for MS specifically. For Lou Gehrig's disease and the zinc formulation, that we know pretty closely what we need to do with that. The phase 1 will begin shortly. We'll go into a phase 2-3 later this year, and probably by this time next year, 2013, we will have results from the phase 2-3 trial. Again, we'll have to go to the FDA and talk to them to find out exactly what we need to do, whether that data is sufficient to be a registration trial or whether we need to do another phase 3. So, again, that's a much shorter timeline than the Trimesta. But, again, the market is not as big for Lou Gehrig's disease as it is for multiple sclerosis.
And lastly, what opportunities do you see for synthetic biologics going forward?
Going forward, we're looking at obviously doing the basic blocking and tackling on our existing programs and moving those forward as aggressively as we can. In addition to that, we are very active on the business development front. We are looking at a variety of programs in the gene therapy and cell-based therapy biologics areas, and we will be pulling programs into the company over the next 4 to 6 months. In addition to that, we will probably expand our relationship with Intrexon. Those are in discussions now. And, we hope to have a very robust pipeline from discovery stage, preclinical stage programs, all the way up to phase 3 within the next year or so.
That was a company snapshot with Jeff Riley of Synthetic Biologics, trading on the Amex under the symbol SYN. This is Matt Margolis of OneMedRadio signing off.